What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Priscilla. If this is your first time joining us on Kim Dave, you're most definitely welcome. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to add a princess seam to a basic bodice block. I'm really going to be focusing on the front because once you kind of get the idea of how it works on the front, it's easy to transfer the idea to the back. So if you'd like to see how I add a princess seam as well as a side dart, then keep on watching. Don't forget to subscribe as well as give this video a thumbs up if you'd like to see more pattern and sewing tutorial. And without further ado, let's jump straight into this video. So what exactly is a princess seam? Princess seams are long rounded seams sewn into women's blouses or shirts or dresses, and it helps to add definition to the fit of the garment, and they usually go from the waist all the way either into the shoulder dart or into the arm curve. I'm also going to be showing you guys how to add a side dart to the basic bodice block, and I'm just going to be doing this on the front of the block as I said earlier on. So I got myself the following tools to help this show go smoothly. I got my back and my front bodice because I'm going to be needing them. I have a separate video for this blocks and I would link that down below. I also got some tape, scissors, my marker pen so you can see what I'm doing, my rulers, as well as pattern paper. So the first thing we'll need to do is to trace out the front of the bodice because that's what we're focusing on. So I'm just going to go ahead and tape this down so it doesn't move around onto fresh pattern paper. I'm going to mark the crucial corners, which is the center front, the shoulder line, the armhole, as well as transfer my notches because those notches are going to be transferred onto the new pattern as well. So I'm just going to take this off and refine those dashed lines using my pattern master. So you can either just continue working with the dashed lines or you can refine this. It's left to you. I just like to see lines clearly. I'm a very visual person. So I'm just going in to make those lines really visible and clear so you can see what I'm doing as well. So once I'm done drawing that in, I'm going to draw in my center front line using my long ruler before going into drawing my bust and waist lines. So after drawing these lines, I didn't add the hip line because that line is going to change because of the side dart that we're going to be adding. The next step is to transfer the darts, and I'm using my good old method of using a pin to puncture that point where the dart meets and mark that point on the fresh pattern paper using a pen. Just mark that sort of hole you've punctured by just rather drawing a circle or a cross or an X so you can see it later on. And I've done that for the 4 points. So I'm going to go in with a ruler and connect the dots, and this is like the easiest way to transfer dots without having to think too much about it. So once I've joined all my points together to form that full dart shape, I'm going to draw a vertical line that goes through the middle of the dot because this line is going to be crucial when it's time to create the princess seam. So I'm going to go ahead and mark 4 inches down. This is not a standard and it's something that would change when you've tested your pattern depending on the shape of your body. So we're going to connect that 4 inches mark all the way to the bust point, and it's not going to be a straight line, it's going to be a curved line because your body is sort of rounded around that point because we have bust as women. So I'm going to go in with my pattern master to draw in my curved line. It doesn't really have to be a specific curve, it can just be, I don't know, whichever works for you, but you need to add a notch at this point because this seam is going to separate the bodies into 2 different panels. So you're going to have one panel in the front which is on the side where the center front line is, and you're going to have one on the side. So when you put left and right panel, join them together with the center one, you have your full front panel. So this is what the pattern looks like right now, and I'm going to go ahead and add my side dart. So the way I do this is my method. Please don't quote me anywhere, but it works for me. If you have a better way to do this, please link a tutorial down below, but this is what I do and it works for me. So the next thing I'm going to do is to mark 3 centimeters down from the bust line, and this 3 centimeter point is going to be connected to 1 inches before the bust point, because the thing with darts is if you go into that bust point, you're going to meet your nipple and it's not a very flattering look on the body. So I'm just going in to connect that 3 centimeter point to my 1 inch before the bust. The next thing is to mark the midpoint of the dart and draw a straight line going from that midpoint all the way to where the dart ends along that bust line. And I've extended that point by 1 centimeter, but of course we're going to create a triangle shape. And when you sew that dart together, because of that triangle shape, you don't lose any centimeters along the side seam. Some people do this slightly differently, but this is the way I know how to sort of finish off darts along bottoms or along side seams. So because you added 3 centimeters there, and when you sew that in, it's going to take away from the general length of this piece. So I'm going to go ahead and add 3 centimeters to the hem. That way I compensate for the side seam and the general length of the front of this pattern. So once I've added the 3 centimeter, I go ahead and I just smoothen out that edge. I don't like to have sharp corners at hems. I just find it more aesthetically pleasing to have like a curved end around the hem. So I went ahead and I extended that vertical line all the way to the bottom of the pattern. So I have one full separate piece for panel 1 and for panel 2. So when you're tracing the 2 panels off, you're not going to trace the dots because that is going to be where the seam is going to lie. It is going to be through that curved line on the top minus the dot and all the way to the bottom. So this will make more sense later on as I trace off the panels. So I'm going to take fresh pattern paper and I'm going to be tracing off the first panel as well as the second. So the first one I'm doing here is panel 1. So I've gotten myself some fresh pattern paper and I've used some weight to hold it down, and I'm just taping down the end so it doesn't move while I work. So I'm just going in and I'm marking points. So I'm marking the shoulder, I'm marking the center front point because I'm tracing panel 1 here, and I'm using a dashed line to trace off the lines at the bottom. You can trace off straight away using your pattern matter. I ended up doing it later on. I don't know why I used dash line initially, and as you can see, I'm not tracing the dot included. I'm tracing that side, that line of the dot for panel 1, and when I'm tracing panel 2, I'll trace the other line of the dot. So I'm just going in to refine my lines using my pattern master and my marker pen so you can clearly see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to do this all the way around, as well as around the curved ends. As you can see, I've transferred my notches because the notch is what will help me remember what point goes with what point when it's time to actually stitch together these pieces. So I'm just going in to finish off this panel, as well as mark on any other necessary bits I need. I'm going to go in and draw in my hip line, my waistline, as well as my bust line, because these points are going to automatically become notches when it's time to connect panel 1 to panel 2. So this point, I'm going to cut on a fold. If you want like the zip or button, then that would be 2 separate panels, but that's another story for another day. So once I'm done tracing out panel 1, I went ahead and I traced out panel 2, just so you really understand and get the gist of how tracing out different panels really work. So as you can see, I'm tracing along that curve, I'm tracing, and I traced as well the other side of the dots, so there is that hole in the middle. So when panel 1 joins panel 2, you automatically have your dots sewn in. So I'm just writing in other necessary information. I traced out my dot line as well. I added my grain lines, I added my notches, and as you can see, that one piece has become 2 pieces. So by the time you sew these 2 together, you've created your princess seam. So I decided to do this one that goes into the arm curve because I don't know, I just prefer it. You can have yours go all the way to the shoulder, but that's just what I decided to do for this video. So I've gone ahead and I've added 1 centimeter seam allowance because I actually want to test this pattern if it works, and I can credibly tell you, okay, it's fine, you can go ahead and do one for yourself. So I went ahead and I traced the back panel. I just left the back panel the way it was. I transferred the dots, the bust, waist, and hip line. just as basic as the block was. All I did was add 1 centimeter seam allowance because I'm going to be testing the pattern. So I got myself some calico because I'm going to cut this pattern in calico to see if the seam actually comes out beautifully and if I need to make any changes. So I'm just going to cut that panel 1 on a fold, so I have 1 piece. I'm going to be cutting 2 pieces for panel 2, so I have 1 for the left and for the right hand side. And for the back, I'm going to be cutting 2 so I can get in and out of the sort of sample I'm going to be making using this pattern. So I'm going ahead and I'm cutting the pieces I need. I'm cutting 2 for the side panel, as I said earlier on, and I'm cutting 1 for the center piece as well as my back pieces, so I have a whole piece. So don't forget to mark those notches, because believe you me, those notches will become really crucial when it's time to join together this curved end especially. So mark the notches for the side panel as well as the center panel. So the next thing to do is to pin the side darts. So I transferred that dart point from the pattern onto the actual fabric. I pinned it before I taken it to my sewing machine, and I sew it into nothing so it looks really nice and beautiful on. So after doing that, it's time to join the side panels onto the actual center panel. So what I like to do is I like to pin the end and then find the middle point through those notches. This is where the notches would either make or break this project. So I'm going ahead and I'm pinning the end here, as you can see, and then I'm going to find middle points in that sort of curved shape that we created. And because you're sewing together 2 curved seams, you sort of have to ease the bigger one into the smaller one. So I'm just taking my time and I'm moving sort of the gathers in quotes into places where you can't see them. Some people like to cut tiny snips on the smaller side so it has more room to stretch when it's time to sew. But I sort of know how to do this, but take your time when you're doing this step, because if you don't ease both sides evenly to each other, when you've sewn and turn the garment inside out, you see like little gathers or puckering, and it doesn't really look very pleasant on the eye. So I'm just taking my time here, easing both curved ends into each other. And what I do sometimes is I actually literally pull the shorter side, as you can see here, to make sure that the bigger side fits perfectly. So I went ahead and I pressed all of my seams sideways and I pressed the darts downwards, so when you put it on, everything stays nice and flat. This is what darts actually do. So they have a way of sculpting flat fabric to create dimension. You can already imagine where the bust is supposed to be because of the side dart and this princess seam that we have created. So I've pressed this beautifully and it looks good already, even though I haven't added like the back panels. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew the darts for the back. I'm just going to skip over that because the focus here is really the princess seam and the side dart. So I've gone ahead and I've sewn my back darts and I'm going to join those back panels to the front panel. So I'm going to pin together my shoulder points as well as the side seam. And because we added 3 centimeters to that front and we took it away through the darts, the front and the back match. So don't forget to add that, however much you decide to take in through that side dart, remember to add it to the front hem, because if you don't, you're going to find out that the front is going to end up being shorter than the back when it's time to join the side seams. So I'm just going ahead and I'm joining up the last of the side seam of the back panel to finish off this sort of testing of the pattern. So this is the garment all stitched together, pressed beautifully and on the mannequin. So it looks relatively good, if I'm being honest. I would change a few things. I would drop that curve, the beginning of the curve, by like 1 inch, probably lower, but not too low. I think it looks nice on my body because I made it to my body size. That's why I like literally put it on to see how it fits. I can already imagine creating several other things from this pattern that I made. I'll just go back and make some changes on the original plan before going back to do anything more creative. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you have any questions, suggestions or ideas, please ask down below. And until my next video, have a good morning, afternoon and evening wherever you are. Bye.